Hello and welcome along to a special TCM Howzat, looking back at the One Day Cup so far. We've been meaning to do this for a while because August has been a month of Metro Bank fever, and let's be real, we all caught it. Now, joining me for this one is one man who got a particularly bad case and is therefore particularly qualified to talk about this. It's Aaron, the cricket connoisseur, who also hosts the County Cricket podcast. Aaron, thank you very much for joining me. So let's start with your thoughts on the tournament so far. How much have you enjoyed it?
Well, first and foremost, Si, thank you for the lovely introduction. Yes, it's been quite the case of Metro Bank fever, still recovering from the symptoms, even in early September. Such was the severity of my case. But yeah, honestly, I absolutely have loved this tournament so far. It ended in heartbreak for my county of Warwickshire. I'm sure that we'll discuss that at some point, unfortunately, for us as Bears fans. But the tournament as a whole has just been wonderful to see, hasn't it? In terms of the eclectic mix of youth and experience, we've seen some great young players coming through the ranks, really establish themselves as county cricketers over the course of this tournament. And what final we've got in store as well. Hampshire versus Leicestershire. Leicestershire in their first One Day Cup final for 22 years, taking on a Hampshire side who have got arguably the best white ball bowling attack in the entire country. It's going to be absolutely cinematic, box office, blockbuster, whatever synonym you want to describe it as. The Metro Bank One Day Cup has well and truly delivered. And honestly, even though the Bears aren't in the final, bring it on. I'll be there at Trent Bridge on Saturday, the 16th of September.
It's going to be great fun. I think we can both agree the best teams have made it to that final. Where to start, though? So many stories, so many things that we could talk about. Let's just go more general to start with. Which teams have particularly impressed you this tournament? Is it the two who are in the final, or is there anyone else who's caught your eye?
Well, first and foremost, Simon, I think absolutely Hampshire and Leicestershire, the best two teams probably have gone through, even though the Bears also won 7 out of their 8 matches in the group stage. That performance in the semi-final was dire, let's face it, diabolical, whatever you want to describe it as. 93 all out in a semi-final, simply not good enough for a club of this stature and size. But Hampshire and Leicestershire really impressive, in particular the Foxes of Leicestershire, because yes, they weren't missing many players as a result of the hundreds, but you've still got to put in some big performances. In Group A, what was the group of death, 5 out of last year's 6 playoff teams were in that group, and Leicestershire made it through. And that performance against Gloucestershire in the semi-final, obviously there would have been some pressure, there was some bad weather around at Grace Road. They held their nerve impeccably in that match. So absolutely, Leicestershire really have stood out to me over the course of this competition. Great to see Josh Hull as well, rising through the ranks, really displaying his skills as a white ball bowling option. And then Hampshire, where do we start? As I mentioned, the bowling has just been absolutely exceptional. Liam Dawson taking career best figures of 7 for 15 in that semi-final against the Bears at Edgbaston. And then Ian Holland, 17 wickets over the course of this tournament so far, the joint second leading wicket taker. He's been brilliant, hasn't he, Dutchy? So again, Ian Holland deserves an immense amount of credits. And even their young guns have come up through the ranks, the likes of Dom Kelly, Eddie Jack, Joseph Eklund as well. Hampshire really have got the makings of a serious team. And then one final player, just to give a bit of a shout out to, Fletcher Middleton. Again, outstanding. That team, the Rose and Crown, I don't know how on earth they keep on doing it, but their academy is just churning out incredible players, very, very gifted white ball cricketers. And absolutely, Hampshire and Leicestershire were the two sides, apart from the Bears, who really stood out to me in this year's tournament.
Definitely, and we will come back to that final at the end and build it up a little bit more. For now, though, let's talk a bit more about the teams who haven't made it through but have had decent tournaments. Let's start on the issue of depleted squads. You mentioned the 100, you mentioned not a lot of sides, sides losing players to them. In terms of that, Somerset, Surrey, the likes of them, how do you think they've handled the challenge of not having their players with them, and what effect has that had as a knock-on to the tournament and for their chances?
Well, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because how the rules have changed in 2023 means that some teams actually got some players back. So, for example, Warwickshire got Henry Brooks back, Jacob Bethel back, Danny Briggs back, and of course, Sam Hain for the semi-final, whereas teams like Somerset and Surrey didn't have that luxury. So in terms of the long-term competition formats, I think that's something that does almost need to be looked at. You can question the integrity. Is it fair that some teams get to have their players back, whereas others don't? And all of the rules surrounding that, and then the fact that overseas players can't just be signed up later on in the tournament as well. There are a lot of questions about the format to take into the future. But in terms of the Metrobank One Day Cup as it is, it exists primarily now, I think, as a development competition. And I think for sides such as Somerset and Surrey, yes, you can feel a bit aggrieved. Essex as well. Essex were missing quite a few players. They had a really poor tournament. But at the same time, you look at a side like Warwickshire. Warwickshire missing 7 players. They still top Group B. You look at other teams in this competition, Lancashire as well, missing a bunch of players to the 100. They didn't complain. They got on with it. They won matches. It will take time with teams like Somerset and Surrey. But the learnings, the lessons that they've taken from this tournament will stand them in really good stead for the future. So I think they've got to look at it in 2 ways. Yes, it's disappointing. Yes, it's frustrating. Of course it is. We as county cricket fans want to win every single competition, every single trophy available. And I completely understand that. But at the same time, you've also got to look ahead to the future. And in a few years' time, in particular, that Somerset team, I mean, goodness me, they've got some great young players out of Surrey. So if we're looking at it from a bigger picture, disappointing this year, but give it another couple seasons, 2-3 years, I do think we'll see the benefits and the rewards being reaped by those 2 counties.
You mentioned it's a development competition. I think that's what the beauty of the One Day Cup in its current form is. We get to see these players showcasing. We get to see new talents coming through the ranks. I want to talk about 2 talents in particular who have had a brilliant tournament, and the team which had a brilliant tournament as well. And that is Gloucestershire and the Price brothers, as well as Miles Hammond and others in that side who did particularly well in this tournament. For them as a side, they'll be gutted not to be going to Trent Bridge, won't they?
Absolutely. And again, I didn't mention Gloucestershire beforehand, but the glorious Gloucesters had an excellent time of it. They really did. I mean, they had a couple of poor performances in the Midlands, in particular, the heavy defeats to my county of Warwickshire, but other than that, they were pretty much faultless. They really were with the bat, and in particular, the ball in hand. That's something which really stood out to me towards the end of the competition. Obviously, they got knocked out in the semis in the end, but their bowling really improved. In particular, Anwar Ali, I thought he bowled really well towards the end of the competition, the Pakistani overseas. So there's a lot of positives for Gloucestershire to take away. But you mentioned those 2, the Price brothers. Goodness me, Tom and Ollie just having wonderful seasons. They've got incredibly high ceilings in this game, and they just continue to perform, whether it's white ball cricket, red ball cricket, List A, T20, first class cricket. They are 2 of the most exciting prospects in the entire country right now. And the scary thing about Ollie Price in particular, yes, we know earlier on in the season, Tom Price, hat-trick and 100 in the same day. But Ollie Price last season was primarily a batting option. And now he's really honed and improved his off spin. And he's a bona fide all-rounder. They've got 2 all-rounders, one of whom bowls seam, the other one bowls spin. And they're just absolutely killing it. So shout out to both those players. I know that you made the video, didn't you, Simon, on your TikTok? I did see that. Very informative. And to be honest, they deserve the plaudits. They deserve the attention. They deserve the credit. If you're a Gloucestershire fan, keep an eye on these 2 talents heading into the future, because honestly, they could play for England. That is the level that I expect of them. Obviously, things do have to go in your way. Okay, it's not just a case of this, general trajectory. You do well in county cricket, you're guaranteed a place in England. But yeah, just watching those 2 over the past couple of seasons, they can certainly make it if things go their way.
It'll be great to see their development as well. We'll touch on other players and other teams that have, had these stories, but I want to talk a bit more now about Kent, who are the defending champions this year. Obviously, they're not making it to Trent Bridge. Where do you think it went wrong for them this year? And in terms of their players, they've had some new talents coming through, Jaden Denley being one of them. And of course, as a Lancashire fan, I can't go without mentioning Matt Parkinson, who's had an absolute whale of a time.
He really has 17 wickets over the course of 7 matches. I believe it was, again, joint second leading wicket taker alongside Ian Holland. And it's great to see. I don't know what on earth has happened with Matt Parkinson and Lancashire. That is one of the biggest stories in the county circuit this summer. But he will be a massive loss for the Red Rose and a huge gain for Kent. Because for years, I've been looking at them And I think their bowling attack is definitely their weakness. Now they've got a bona fide wicket-taking spin option, which obviously in Canterbury might not be the biggest of things. It is quite a flat wicket, small boundaries, but you don't play all your games in Canterbury. You know, for example, when they're going to Edgbaston, when they're going to Old Trafford, where there's that extra bit of nip and purchase off the surface for spin bowlers, Matt Parkinson will feast. And honestly, it's great to see him back to his best. So he was definitely a massive positive for Kent. But aside from that, Simon, I think it was a case of a poor start and then the confidence was just knocked, to be honest. It would have been a very difficult thing to go back to back. Again, they're in a very difficult group. We mentioned the group of death. It really was. You could not put a foot wrong in that group. The fact that two sides won 7 out of 8 matches was ridiculous. And that's why I mentioned the strength and talent of Hampshire and Leicestershire. That was a very, very tough group to get out of. And as for Kent, it was just a little bit too little too late, wasn't it? Whereas a team like Lancashire, they progressed at the right times, they peaked at the right times to reach that quarter-final. Kent, unfortunately, didn't. And it was just a bridge too far with that defeat of the Isle of Wight. But again, I think they've got some positives. We mentioned Matt Parkinson and obviously Jaden Denley. What a great talent he is. And wonderful to see, wasn't it? An uncle and nephew playing in the same county 11. It's been years since that's happened. So again, shout out to Jaden. Had an instant impact, I think, in his first 2 matches. They won both of them. So again, if you're a Kent fan, future is bright. Watch out for him. Very, very gifted cricketer.
I think what's great about the One Day Cup is we're talking about these stories and these, these young players coming through and being amazing, and all these counties having a whale of a time. You touched a bit on Lancashire there, so let's address it whilst we're there. Obviously, a hammering in the quarterfinal against Gloucestershire, but it felt maybe to me that they didn't quite have the luck of the draw in the group games, 2-0 results, which perhaps hampered their chances of getting further up that table in the group of death. What did you think about them, and where do they go from here? Because obviously no silverware again up in the northwest.
Yeah, it's very interesting, to be honest. I think Lancashire, they are the county to watch out for over this winter, because I don't know what on earth's going on with them. So as of this recording, Simon, I'll give you a little bit of a stat. It's been 185 days since Lancashire have made a contract announcement or a signing. It's the longest period of any county. We haven't had a single announcement from them since the 3rd of March. So that says it all. And yet we've had 3 massive departures. Obviously, Parkinson, we've touched upon. Danny Lamb has gone to Sussex and Rob Jones has gone to Worcestershire. As a result of that as well, Dane Villas has also retired. We don't know the overseas situation for next year. So there's a lot of questions surrounding Lancs at the moment, and these next few months will be key in terms of their future. But in terms of the tournament, I've got to say, I don't think they did too badly. I think they did very well to reach the quarterfinal. As I said, there were about 5 or 6 teams which had a very good chance of reaching that 3rd and final playoff spot. And yes, it did end in heartbreak. It was an outstanding knock from Miles Hammond, his maiden list day century in the format. But I think for the most part, Lancs shouldn't be that disappointed. Given the fact that they're missing so many players, they've had some key injuries and the season hasn't gone great. I do think the One Day Cup has been a bit of a positive in what otherwise has been a very underwhelming season. And again, that might be harsh. That might be harsh because they're not exactly in the relegation battle. They didn't have a bad T20 blast. But this is Lancashire. They're the 3rd most successful club in England and Wales. This is not a case of a team which is meant to be sauntering through the county circuit and, finishing 3rd and 4th. They should be winning titles. They should be winning titles, and yet they aren't. It's been, 8 years now since they last won a major trophy. I know they won Division 2 in 2019, sorry. But other than that, there's been no silverware. Yeah. There has been no trophies for Lancashire County Cricket Club. So we'll have to wait and see what happens. And I suppose the other big question for Lancs heading into the winter, will Glenn Chappell still be the coach? I will be very, very interested to see the situation on that. So watch out for Lancashire if you're neutral, because this winter could be very, very busy indeed.
And if you're a fan like me of Lancashire, it's going to be a long winter, I think, looking at all these changes that could be coming to the club. And I would agree with you. It has been very disappointing from a Lancashire perspective to not see us challenging for those trophies this year in the way we did last year. I really felt this year was our year, but it just hasn't been again. And I think you are right. Questions now have to come towards the management of that side. not a trophy for since 2014. So I think it will be interesting. Hopefully we'll get some off-season business in and go again in 2024. But again, a very underwhelming season for us. Not an underwhelming competition for another side, and that's Worcestershire, who have had, I think it's fair to say, a rocky run in county cricket recently, and then to come out firing in front of sold-out home crowds at New Road, they've had an absolute great time, and just, it felt like they've really enjoyed playing one-day cricket this time.
They certainly have. And aside from the Derby Day demolition that they faced at the hands of Warwickshire, I think they had a wonderful campaign. I really do, given the fact that, again, it's been a very tumultuous season for Worcestershire. So many departures. Ben Cox leaving to Leicestershire is the latest one of a whole flurry of guys who have gone, the likes of Jack Haynes, Dylan Pennington, Pat Brown's gone to Derbyshire as well. So much has happened at Worcestershire, but that one-day cup campaign was excellent, in particular the batting and the bowling of Josh Baker. Now, I think a lot of people, unfortunately, do look at Josh Baker and they remember that over against Ben Stokes last season. That's what they pigeonhole him as the guy who went for 30-odd runs in an over. He is a very, very good spin bowler, and he showed that in this year's tournaments. Again, Worcestershire's leading wicket taker, dangerous in every single game, took wickets wherever he was playing. So watch out for Josh Baker, but yeah, I was very, very impressed. I thought Logan Van Beek as well. Great signing. Really shrewd piece of business. You've got an international quality player who just come off of some excellent qualifiers over in Zimbabwe. And he just added that extra bit of star factor, didn't he, to that Worcestershire lineup with both the ball and the bat in hand. So I think for the pairs, or the Rapids, as they're known, in white ball cricket, again, this is a really exciting time. A lot has changed. But then again, this is a club which, in recent years, I think it's safe to say, has stagnated a bit since 2018. They had that peak with the T20 Blast Trophy, and since then, they've just been meandering, haven't they? Across all three formats, they haven't really been challenging for trophies, aside from the County Championship this season, weirdly enough. They've just won 3 in a row. They're well and truly in the promotion race, but I think heading into the future, with the additions they've got, I think Worcestershire are a real dark horse in List A cricket. Ethan Brooks is a wonderful player, great fielder as well, one of the best in the entire circuit. Rob Jones, in List A cricket last year, averaged over 70, and again, produced some very good knocks for the Rapids this season. So, again, watch out for Worcestershire. A good campaign, but I think they'll go one better next season. I think they'll reach the semi-finals.
And it's great to see them doing well again, because George, my mate, is a Worcestershire fan, and he's been in so much pain over the past few years. So it's great to see them challenging in a competition like this. Two teams who didn't challenge this year, and I really want to spotlight, are Sussex and Derbyshire. Now, perhaps on paper going into this tournament, they don't lose that many big names to the 100. So I suppose my question to you is, why do you think they've underperformed so badly this year, and why have they had such a terrible tournament?
I honestly wish I had the answer, because before the tournament started, I had Sussex in the top 3 in Group B. It was the only one of the top 3 that I got wrong, and I finished rock bottom of the group in the end. But I don't know with Sussex. Again, it was just a poor start and it steamrolled, and I suppose that is down to lack of experience. If they would have had a good start, a good, beginning to Group B, I think they would have gone on, because they steamrolled last season. It's exactly what happened in 2022. But again, a couple of losses, some heavy losses in there as well, it has to be said. I think it just derailed them right from the get-go. And I think that the lack of key white ball players probably did lead to their downfall, even though they weren't many. Right, the fact is, in a tournament like this, when you get off to a bad start, you need those leaders in the dressing room. And I don't think Sussex have that at this particular moment in time. They're a little bit raw in comparison to other counties. In terms of Derbyshire, again, I have absolutely no idea how on earth they're not competing, because on paper, again, they look quite good. Yes, they're not the strongest on paper, but in terms of their team dynamic, they're one of the closest dressing rooms in the entire circuit. They've got talent there, with the likes of Brooke Guest, with the likes of Harry Kane, for example. The bowling attack as well isn't exactly poor. That bowling attack can produce the goods on a given day, but it was just consistency. And heading into next season, that will be the interesting thing for me. I think Derbyshire will be looking in the same bowling department And they have actually done that. They've gone with Pat Brown. Mohamed Amir will join the club in 2024 as well. But in the list day format in particular, I'll be keeping a close eye out on the bowling. I think in the batting, they're actually fine. Obviously, if Wayne Madson's there, brilliant. He was away for a couple of games with Italy in the T20 qualifiers up in Scotland. But I think once he's back, I think once that batting unit has gelled, and once they've got those new bowlers, again, watch out for them. Not quite dark horses yet, are the Falcons, but I do think they'll definitely have a better time of it in next year's Metrobank One Day Cup.
I think it'll be one to forget, though, for Sussex and Derbyshire this year. Let's talk about your beloved Bears then. And obviously, you mentioned they've gone wrong. I feel like we have a common shared pain of our teams not particularly performing at crucial key moments. But having said that, there have been some stars this year for you, including Oliver Hannon-Danelby, who's the leading wicket taker in this year's tournament, 24 wickets for him. So on him, what did you make of him? And then on the team itself, how disappointed are you, and what went wrong in that performance against Hampshire?
I'll start off with that everything, first and foremost. That was one of the worst performances I've seen in 14 years as a fan of Warwickshire County Cricket Club. But we'll start with the positives. Oliver Hannon-Dalby and Ed Barnard, absolutely outstanding. OHD, 24 wickets. As you mentioned, Simon, it's the most in a single 50-over campaign by any Warwickshire bowler. So shout out to the Owl. I thought he was absolutely magnificent. That 531 at New Road as well is something that I'll remember for a very, very long time. And then, of course, Ed Barnard as well, 616 runs over the course of this tournament, the leading run scorer. I don't think he'll be caught. So at the same time as it's wonderful to see both the leading run scorer and wicket taker being Warwickshire players, it's gutting, to be honest, because they've performed so well in the group stages. And then that performance, if you can even call it a performance, it felt like they didn't show up against Hampshire, has completely derailed things. A bit like last year in the T20 Blast. Not many people remember that Warwickshire scored more 200-plus scores last year in that competition than any other Warwickshire side before them, because of how badly wrong it went against Hampshire in the quarters. And history repeated itself. 93 all out in a semi-final was diabolical. It really was. The body language was poor right from the get-go. They looked as though as soon as that toss was lost, they looked defeated. It was a case of, all right, the game plan is out the window. We don't quite know how to react to this. And they just collapsed. Some of the shot making, the decision making was absolutely horrendous. Again, the fielding in Hampshire's chase. I know you're defending 94, but you can at least look like you're trying to win the game. A lot of laughing in the field as well. I couldn't believe it. I genuinely couldn't. This is a major semi-final, and I know that we mentioned beforehand the One Day Cup has become more of a developmental competition. That does not take away its importance. Just because it's changed its roots, its meaning in county cricket, does not mean that you can put in a performance like that and it doesn't hurt us as fans. I hurt after that. I still am. All these weeks later, I waited 7 years to watch the Bears in a playoff match in the One Day Cup. For the first time since 2016, I had belief, I had optimism. I thought we're going to reach Trent Bridge. Been wonderful in the group stage. And look what happened. 93 all out, the 6th lowest list day total in Warwickshire's history, and the lowest in a 50-over game. And you save it for a semi-final. Words fail me, to be completely honest. I don't know what on earth has happened in these past couple of weeks. We've followed it up with an absolute disaster class against Surrey as well. This team are wonderful when the pressure isn't on. So in the group stage, they've got the talent, they've got the ability. This is a wonderful Warwickshire side. And don't for 1 second, for Warwickshire fans watching this, think that I believe that this is a bad Warwickshire team. They're not. They're excellent. And that's why I'm so frustrated, because they lack that extra 5 or 10% that teams like Hampshire, that teams like Surrey possess in those key moments. And I think heading into the winter as well, I think the Bears really need to look at themselves, because this is going to be, it's going to be a team of the Nearlies, when it could have been a team which went on to win a lot of trophies, like the team of the 2010s. And instead, we're looking back on these past 2 seasons with a lot of missed opportunities. A massive missed opportunity in this year's One Day Cup, the T20 Blast, heartbreak against Essex in the quarterfinals, and again, the county championship. 1 win out of the last 6 completely derailed the title race. So I think it's been an incredibly disappointing, incredibly frustrating time for the Bears. And again, I do think there'll be some changes. There's been a lot more talk this season about Mark Robinson's future. because the team have not progressed how we expected them to. You think last year, almost getting relegated, it took Liam Norwell taking 9 for 62 to keep our place in the first division. And then this summer, obviously the performances have been excellent in the group stages, but all that hard work's been undone in the playoffs. So we'll have to wait and see what happens with Warwickshire. There's always 2024. And I suppose just to end it with a little bit of optimism and positivity, since 1994, Warwickshire have won at least one trophy in a year ending in the number 4. So 1994, the treble, 2004, the county championship, 2014, the T20 Blast, 2024, Metrobank One Day Cup. Who knows? We'll wait and see, but I'm still backing them. I'm still backing them. They just need to improve the mentality heading into the years that follow.
A very niche stat there, but we'll go on with it. We take anything at this point when our teams aren't doing so well. Finally, then, let's touch on the teams that we haven't really talked about. Glamorgan, Northants, Notts, Yorkshire, sort of that. One thing that stuck out to me was the Glamorgan versus Northants game. There was a chase of 340 and a successful chase at that by Glamorgan. Sam Northeast with the running runs there, I believe, in a group stage match. One-day cricket, that's amazing, isn't it?
It really was. Highest run chase of the entire Metrobank One Day Cup. So a brilliant game in what was a very disappointing campaign for both those counties, in particular Northants. As soon as Prithvi Shaw went down injured, again, it looked like belief was just sapped. They didn't find their batting mojo or the groove that they had beforehand. And you mentioned Glamorgan, Sam Northeast, again, we know how talented he is, one of the best on the county circuit, never really gets enough plaudits, in my opinion. But someone who really stood out to me from a Glamorgan perspective is Ben Kellaway. He's just made his first class debut. Unfortunately, Glamorgan did lose to Worcestershire, but again, this guy, someone to watch out for. If you're a fan of the Welsh club, scored 67 from 42 against the Bears, also took 3 for 56 in that game with his spin bowling. He really does display a level of maturity beyond his years. There's a real gifted cricketer in there, so if Glamorgan persist with him, again, he's someone to watch out for. And then in terms of the other counties, someone who we haven't really touched upon is Essex. To be honest, Essex were probably the most disappointing out of any of the counties, because genuinely, I thought that they would have been a playoff team. I had them in the top 3. They had Simon Harmer back for a few of their games. They had guys like Robin Dass and Luke Benkenstein coming back. And I really did feel optimistic about Essex. And unfortunately, it didn't pan out the way that they intended. So as for the other counties, again, it's probably a tournament to forget. But there are some positives, and it comes back to the overarching theme of the developmental aspect of this competition. It's the young players. That's who you can look at heading forward. It's what you can take away as a positive heading into 2024. And for teams like Essex, for teams like Somerset, Surrey, teams like Yorkshire as well, with the likes of Finn Bean, for example, and of course Harry Duke with that match-winning knock against Surrey. They're the things to take away from this campaign, even though it's disappointing. Great match, wasn't it?
And brilliant.
That partnership between him and Dom Leach, outstanding. What an outground as well, York. Lucky for some side, but
lovely ground to be at. Lovely ground to be at. But yes, I think your general points there are all spot on. Right, we touched on Hampshire a lot, so I'm conscious we're running out of time, but let's talk about Leicestershire a bit into that final at Trent Bridge. At the top, you talked about how well they've done. Going into the final, what do they need to do to keep that momentum up and not fall to a very strong Hampshire side?
Keep the same approach. That's what they've got to do, and that is a lot easier said than done against Hampshire, in particular, a side which has just bowled out a table-topping team for 93. It's a lot easier said than done, but they've got to attack Hampshire. You cannot sit on the back foot against the bowling attack with Ian Holland, Keith Barker, Mason Crane in there as well, Liam Dawson off the back of 7 for 15. You've got to attack them. And if it goes wrong, it goes wrong. You've got one chance in a final. They've got to be proactive, because Hampshire's Achilles heel is the batting. And I do think if Leicestershire can put up a big total, it'd be a key for them to bat first, I think, in the final at Trent Bridge and put the pressure on. A bit like Kent did last season against Lancs. I think if they do that and stick with a game plan, they could win it. But the real key differentiator, which could ultimately be Leicestershire's downfall, is the lack of Peter Hanscom, because he was the ice-cool, composed components of that semi-final, kept his cool admirably alongside VR Mulder in that run chase, and he might not be available. They've got Umar Amin as an overseas for the county championship, But as I alluded to earlier, he wasn't registered for the Metrobank One Day Cup, so Leicestershire might not have an overseas player for the final. With that being said, though, they should go in there with belief, with confidence. The bowlers as well, Chris Wright and Josh Hull, have been absolutely magnificent. So can the Foxes do it? Absolutely. But will it be a challenge? Yes, it will, because Hampshire are a very, very strong white ball outfit.
And we shouldn't forget that this is a Leicestershire side that lost their head coach mid-season and have had a new regime come through. So, and a lot of turmoil behind the scenes. So it's quite good to see them on the field, at least, given the departures that are happening at the end of this season, on the field, getting to a final. Finally, then, let's push you through a prediction. Trent Bridge on the 16th of September. You sat watching it at 11 o'clock. Who do you think's going to win?
Through gritted teeth, and I really do want Leicestershire to prove me wrong. Don't get me wrong, I'd love them to win. I do think it'll be Hampshire, because I look at finals, and it's a very, very cliche thing to say, but batters win your games, bowlers win your trophies. And we've seen that so many times in county cricket. That bowling attack is simply sensational. I've mentioned the names. We don't really need to touch upon them further. They've got a team which can lift this tournament. They did it back in 2018. They reached the final in 2019. They've been dominant in the T20 Blast. I think Hampshire's white ball bowling will just be the differentiator in this game, but we'll wait and see. Whatever happens, honestly, I'll be happy for either of those counties, in particular Leicestershire. It's been years since they've had a final, 22 years. 2001 was the last time that Leicestershire fans got to experience this. So, honestly, I hope they have a great day out. I hope that Leicestershire put in an excellent performance, but I think on paper, and I'd be happy to be proven wrong, but just looking at the teams on paper, I'll go with the Rose and Crown of Hampshire. I think they'll win yet another one-day trophy in 2023.
They're too good, really, aren't they? These Hampshire sides that
Yeah.
they keep out in white ball cricket. It's a joke as well, because they've paid me too much, so I have to agree with you there. Listen, it's been an absolute joy talking all things Metrobank One Day Cup with you, Aaron. Go and check out Aaron. His County Cricket podcast is the place to be for all county cricket content. Back here, if you enjoyed, please do like and subscribe. We're going to have some England T20 and ODI content coming your way later this week as well. But for now, though, I think we both need to lie down to recover so we can get our Metrobank fever back to it so that it's ready for the final on Sunday. And hopefully we will review that final as well. But as I say, it's been a tournament to remember so far, and it's not just over yet. Will it be the Foxes or Hampshire who win? We'll wait and see. But thanks for joining us, and thanks for everything, really. We'll see you in the next one. Ta-ra for now.